absurdly, the federal government of the United States, under Obama, who smoked, made no bones about it, the number one issue among many of his supporters was the legalization of marijuana. He dismisses it as a joke. And the federal government continues to lie, the vicious lie, that cannabis has no medical use. This is the official position of the United States government. At the same time, of course, they recognize that 70 to 80% of the American people are in favor of legal access to medical marijuana for people who approach it through their doctors. And yet, the only thing the Obama administration can do is basically say that they're not going to raid dispensaries and operations that are compliant with local laws, which of course is a totally contradictory policy, but it is fairly decent politics for the short run. Now, also understand that in the U.S., because of federal opposition, doctors cannot prescribe cannabis. They can only give recommendations for cannabis. They have, this is sort of a loophole. Here's my loophole. This is my recommendation for medical marijuana in California. I actually got an examination by a physician who was ironically from my home state of Texas and was allowed at the age of 69 at that time to allow medical cannabis, use of medical cannabis. Now, of course, we're always told that medical cannabis will send the wrong message to children, so if somebody's 70 years old and uses medical cannabis, kids are going to think, oh, that's cool, I want to do it too. Pharmacies, because they're under indirect control, cannot sell cannabis, so they're indirect federal control. So cannabis is sold in specialized dispensaries that sell only cannabis-related products in the states that provide them. Doctors cannot, let's say, prescribe it, but not only that, there's a problem there, and that is that it has nothing to do with the law. I understand it's similar problems in the Netherlands, that a lot of doctors are embarrassed, afraid, ignorant, bigoted, and they will not even recommend cannabis for patients, even though they have no legal risk for doing so. The fact is they're simply pig-ignorant and arrogant. I have no patience with doctors who say, oh, we need more research, and they haven't read the existing research. They have a person sitting in front of them who they know that none of the medicines they have recommended have worked, and the patient says that I have found something that worked, it's cannabis. Oh, I can't do anything about that. That's not medicine, that's quackery. Now, the other problem is, in the United States, is that only California law provides for doctors to be able to recommend cannabis for anything which the doctor thinks will be helpful. Now, this is outrageous prohibitions. We only want it for sick and dying people. You can only have it if you're about ready to die. It's called last rites and a toke. This is under federal law, though. Any FDA-approved drug can be prescribed for any use, even though it's not the use for which it was tested, if the doctor thinks that it will be helpful. Cannabis in California is treated that way. In other states, there are lists of disorders. And in Colorado, the list of disorders that have been approved so far does not include post-traumatic stress disorder. We have veterans in the United States committing suicide faster than they're being killed by the Taliban. We have veterans who are seriously, have serious problems committing suicide or simply just dying as a result of the prescription drugs they're given. But quack is in charge of the Colorado medical marijuana system, will not allow disabled veterans to get access to cannabis in Colorado. The state immediately to the south of Colorado, New Mexico, it is on the list, and it is the largest single category. To give you an idea of the magnitude of the problem. So this is, these are things that we have already learned, we have been able to learn because of both the favorable and unfavorable experiences with politicized, inadequate, ignorant regulation of the market. Now, the fact is that when Dr. Lester Grinspoon wrote his book, Marijuana and Forbidden Medicine, in 1993, he concluded that only complete legalization of marijuana, meaning a regulated access for all adults, something like alcohol, tobacco, or over-the-counter drugs, would make it possible to have the full medical potential of cannabis realized. Now, this seems like an extreme statement. Surely, for example, the Netherlands has cannabis in cannabis in pharmacies. But the fact is that when you have all of these regulations set up for pharmaceuticals, and cannabis is so different, the system is simply not compatible with it. Even if the doctors were willing to do their jobs, and they're clearly not, even if the regulators were willing to do their jobs, and they're clearly not, even if the police were willing to be honest, and they're clearly not, the cannabis simply does not fit into the pharmaceutical model. Now, there's one other part of this that I think is very important to understand, and that is that the National Institute on Drug Abuse in the United States funds 85% of the research in the world on illicit drugs. And they will not fund research on the medical use of cannabis. They make the statement, they're very clear. Our focus is primarily on the negative consequences of marijuana use. We generally do not fund research focused on the potential beneficial medical effects of cannabis. We generally do not. They absolutely do not. Occasionally, or fairly often, they make the mistake of funding something that embarrasses them. Mostly, they just simply buy press releases. Now, I really want to emphasize also that focusing on the harms of marijuana, on the harms of cannabis, certainly that every responsible policy has to look and see what the harms of any substance are. But harmlessness is not a criteria for the legalization of anything. Nothing would be legal if it were. Nothing is harmless for everyone under all circumstances and all doses. And it's certainly true of cannabis. But as my friend, the late William F. Buckley, commented about that, is that no one asks what this marijuana prohibition does. Everybody wants to talk about what does marijuana do? But what does marijuana prohibition do? As he puts it, marijuana never kicks down your door in the middle of the night. Marijuana never locks up sick and dying people. Does not suppress medical research. Does not peek into bedroom windows. Even if one takes every reefer madness allegation of the prohibition that's at face value, marijuana prohibition has done far more harm to far more people than marijuana ever could. So I think that we as reformers have to focus on the harms done by marijuana prohibition and focus on that and make very clear that the only solution to this, to the drugs problem, which is enormously complex and is certainly getting worse because of the introduction of new pharmaceutical products, which is what a leading area of drug abuse in the United States is the leakage from the legal pharmaceutical system. We have to focus on how we separate cannabis from the rest of the drugs market and how we can effectively educate people. And the key to that, of course, is by telling the truth, because lying about the Netherlands, lying about marijuana, lying about California now has become a major part of the prohibitionist propaganda machine in the United States and around the world. So I thank you very much for inviting me here, and I look forward to working with you and learning more in the future.